I think we could probably start now. So, good morning. My name is John Foran. I'm an associate professor here at Miami Regionals, and I'm the chair of the Department of Justice and Community Studies. And it's my pleasure to welcome everybody to this morning's panel, which is designed to basically celebrate the contributions of first-generation students here at the Regionals and shine a light on our first-generation student population, and also the first-generation faculty and staff who make up a significant part of our Miami University community here. So this event is, it's going to be essentially an informal conversation. This is sponsored by a partnership between the fantastic First Student Group Committee and the TRIO Student Support Services Program at the Regionals, which serves eligible first-generation students, income-eligible students, and those registered for disability services. Like I said, it's going to be a pretty informal conversation. If anyone watching has any questions or comments that they'd like to have us address or respond to, please feel free to do that too. Our Q&A function is turned on here for the webinar, and also you can submit questions by email or comments by email if you like, and that email address is regionalsfirstgen, all one word, regionalsfirstgen@miamioh.edu. So again, thanks for joining us, and let me start actually by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk about their connection to Miami and their connection to this event ultimately. So who would like to go first? I can draft.
Sure, I'll go first.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm Bob Davis. I was a statistics professor for about 25 years before moving into an associate dean's role. So I'm an associate dean on the regionals now. I was a first generation college student, and in fact, of my daughter's 4 grandparents, my mother was the only one that even finished high school. So it was a different time. So I always feel like the fact that my daughter has 2 parents who have PhDs after having 4 grandparents, only one of whom finished high school, I feel like that's how it's supposed to work. I went to Loyola of New Orleans for my undergraduate work and loved it, and still have very fond memories and stop by there every time I'm in New Orleans, even though now I'm old enough that none of my professors still work there.
Great, thanks. Jamie, how about you? Oh, was Jamie? Oh, okay. Troylin. Somebody.
Okay, yeah. I was muted. I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Okay, so my name is Dr. D, and I teach in the Department of Education and Society kinesiology area. And I am a first generation college student, or was one, and I started just in a 2-year community college because I was really insecure at first about going to college. Nobody in my family, parents or my siblings, even finished high school. So, and they were not at all supportive at first of me doing this. And I think some of them, when I kept going to get my doctorate, because I earned my associates in applied science for medical assisting, and then went on. And when I kept going all the way to my doctorate, which is in health promotion, they were like, are you going to ever stop? Anyway, so I'm really excited to be here, and that's it. Thanks.
Oh, great. Thanks. Lynn, could you go next?
Hi, I'm Lynn Ditch. I am an associate professor for languages, literatures, and writing. I'm also the director for the Center of Teaching and Learning. Yeah, sorry. I'm under the weather too, so I apologize ahead of time if things blank out a bit. I'm heavily medicated. I am here because I wish that I had known certain things going through college, and probably still at this point. I'm a family of refugees from Vietnam. My parents had grade school education, which I don't even know if it's comparable to what we have here in the United States. My sister did go to college, but I think there was a lot of just newness in whatever that meant. So not a lot of people in my circle were able to help me think through what it meant to apply to college, go to college, and try to succeed through all of that. So yeah, it's been a journey, and I still think it is a journey. And I just hopefully can share my story and help other first generation students think about what they can do to succeed as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Troylin?
My story is very much similar to Bob's story. No one on my father's side, college, no one on my mother's side, and she's one of, I think, 10. She's the youngest. She ended up getting her degree a little bit later. And the first words out of my mouth was college, because my parents just kept telling me you're going to go, but they couldn't answer any questions. And I think that's probably going to be a recurring theme about it. Couldn't really answer any questions about it. But like for me, and I celebrated it being new and just kind of walking kind of like eyes wide open to a new world. I liken to going to a different country, and you're an adult and you know your own native language, but when you're in a different country speaking that speaking language native not to you, it's like being a child and you're like, I know what I want to say, but brand new world. So a lot of what I hopefully can add to this is just, I mean, it's complicated, it's exciting, and it's completely different to people who are not first gen. And I think that's something I've actually really liked, as well as being a person of color. So it's just things compounded and conflated. Hopefully I can demystify some things or make it more complicated. I don't know.
Thanks. Devin? Are we?
I'm just tech support, John, so I am not a participant.
All right. And Jamie, did you want to say anything, or?
Sure. Hi, folks. I'm Jamie Byers. I started at the regionals as a first generation college student and now get to serve as the director of our TRIO program. We are really excited to have you here. Shining light on first generation students, faculty, staff is something very personal to me, and we're very excited to hear your stories and your advice. So thank you all very much for coming. And I'm monitoring the chat, the Q&A, and then that regionals first gen email account. So please feel free to send those questions or comments through.
And Jamie, before you turn your mic back off, could you just say very quickly what is TRIO for someone who doesn't know what it is?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, thank you. We're a free support program for students at Miami Regionals who are seeking a bachelor's degree. And we work to provide very holistic services. A lot of what we do, we serve first generation students. We serve students who meet income guidelines, and we serve students who are registered with our Disability Services Department. And we work as guides, I think is kind of a good way to think about it. We're certified life coaches, and we help students figure this all out, this whole new system, this entire new language, like it was mentioned in the college environment, and figuring out all of the opportunities that exist. So yeah, please feel free to check us out on the regionals webpage. It's TRIO Student Support Services. We would love to support students. And then this committee, the Fantastic First, is actually a student organization as well. So if you're a first gen student listening, we would love to have you get involved. You can search us on the hub on My Miami and learn more about other events that we'll be putting on.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
And, yeah, thanks. So as I said, this is an informal conversation, so we're just going to throw things out and talk about them essentially. So to get the ball rolling on that, a few different people mentioned in some way sort of feeling a little lost or feeling a little uncomfortable or, just out of a comfort zone especially early on, going to college as a first generation college student. I certainly had that experience. I was a first generation student too. And it took a while to sort of, realize, first of all, like yeah, I could do this. This, you know, this, I know how to do this thing, right? But there is this, and a lot of people talk about this, a certain level of discomfort early on. Could you talk about that? Sort of think back to when you were a college student, and sort of how did that feel? How long did it take you to get past that feeling ultimately? You just, somebody want to jump in?
So I think in my case, I was always a big reader growing up. So I knew a lot more words from reading than I knew from conversation. But what that meant was there were lots of words that I didn't know how to mispronounce. And I can remember a couple of times, so there were, Loyola is a Jesuit university, so a lot of people came there from private Catholic high schools that had better preparation than I did. And I remember distinctly a couple of occasions where I mispronounced words, and I could see other people sort of, they didn't necessarily laugh out loud, or maybe it was just me projecting, but I felt like they were smirking, you know, kind of like, look at this idiot, he doesn't even know how to pronounce these words. So that was one for me. And then another was just, I think what goes hand in hand a lot of times with being a first gen student is being economically disadvantaged. So I owned fewer clothes than my classmates, and they were not as nice either. So, you know, you couldn't help but feel a little bit self-conscious about that. And it's just something that you have to realize. Those aren't the things that matter. Those aren't the things that mean you are or are not going to succeed. But it did make me feel uncomfortable for at least at first.
Yeah, thanks. Others, I can identify with the having read more than I had spoken and mispronouncing words. I have a specific recollection. I'm 54 years old, and I remember my first year in college of mispronounce. And this was a function of not only sort of lower middle class upbringing and sort of not having these conversations, but also just I grew up in a rural area in Ohio, and then I was in school in a city with a lot of folks who had much more sort of exposure, sort of culturally to lots of things. And I remember using what I now recognize as bad grammar in class, but it still is. And since then, I've realized, like, well, this is just, these are regional dialects and that kind of, and it's absolutely fine. But I remember a moment in class where I used an expression that would strike someone who wasn't from rural Ohio as being grammatically incorrect. And this was at the University of Chicago, and I felt a lot of pressure, essentially. And I remember the reaction of like, what was that? You know, that, yeah, what? Because you didn't hear incorrect grammar necessarily. Now, you know, the 54-year-old in me would go like, yeah, here's why I did that, and, you know, and kind of go back at him. But as a freshman in college, I was felt very out of place about that. So enough that I still remember it as an old guy now. So yeah, you get by it. So I don't know if others have those kinds of experiences or.
For me, there were two things that felt awkward for me. And the first one was mostly navigating the system. Because I had no one to take me through. I didn't know about, I definitely came from a family that was in poverty. We moved every year and things like that. We were, you know, dysfunctional. And I think that's what motivated me to even go to college, because I thought, okay, the only way out of this mess, this was my younger years, the only way out of this mess is to do the opposite of what my family's doing, which means I need to go to college. So, but I didn't have family or friends that could help me navigate the student loans. And I definitely needed student loans. I did get some grants. I didn't know about grants, but I needed help with that, even just scheduling my classes. And to me, that was scary. But I also, so that was the one big challenge. But I'll let you off the hook right now. I think after the first year going through that, it gets easier, because I'm like, okay, now I know how to do this, you know. But it was always the first year for me, and even into the second year, some level of self-doubt. Like, can I really do this? And especially because my family would, especially my brothers, would just constantly actually put me down for going to college. and wasting my money and wasting my time. And, you know, and it was hard to work against that pushback that I was getting. Instead of being, you know, saying, hey, this is great, you're doing this, and trying to improve, they were like being very judgmental of me doing that. And then also trying to pull me down and make me doubt myself. But after the first year, and I had some fabulous faculty take me under their wing and encourage me and recognize these challenges. And I won like a student award that really bolstered my confidence so much. And that's why I actually started with my associates. Like it was like me starting at a community college back in New Jersey, where I'm from. It was like me dipping my toe in the pool. Like, can I do this? And I did really well. And then I just started going up, and yeah. So self-doubt and navigating the paperwork, let's just say that. But otherwise, that's my experience, my awkwardness.
I wanted to piggyback off of the doubting family. So that would be those that are more my senior in my family that are looking at somebody, 18, 20 years younger than them, that's doing something that they probably wanted to do and didn't have a lick of a word of encouragement. Not my grandmother. My grandmother did. Of course, my mother did. One of my uncles did. The other was not a fan. And then a lot of on my mom's side of the family who were also, none of them went to college. The majority of the elders, I think I only have one that actually is attending college, but has tried it multiple times. So when they see a trend of not getting a degree, and I think there's a bit of arrogance that they assume comes with the territory of academia, which is a different conversation. But and I'm kind of person, I wasn't really looking for family support. I'm the oldest of the, I guess, third generation in my family. So I knew I was going to go to college. I knew I was going to be the first person to go to college. I knew I had to do it right the first time. So getting kicked out of my second year wasn't the best thing. And I didn't really tell anybody except my mom, but I had a plan coming back. I think what was really challenging, as I'm curious about life, I'm always pushing myself, competitive, and, signing these forms. I'm just like, get it right. Just learn what I need to do. I'm that kind of person that I didn't really ask for help. I just tried to figure out on my own. And so there's some people that are successful at that. I'm like that spectrum next to that. I was somewhat successful. I got it right the second time. But what that ended up making me do is I essentially just learned college on my own, as eventually, as Dee was saying, it does get easier, but you have to ask a lot of questions. If you're the type of person like me who chose to just jump into a road traveled, but choose to not follow the guide, then you're figuring everything out on your own. And what was useful for me is that, one, I learned college. I learned how to navigate courses and find essentially becoming my own advisor, learning like what I can actually handle the hard way. I could have had a 5-minute conversation with somebody and then made my life easier, but I chose not to do that. That matured me in a very different way that makes me a lot more self-sufficient and very useful for what I do professionally. And then moving on to master's and graduate degree work or doctoral was so much easier. But I think what was, and I alluded to this earlier, first generation is not a visible identity. It's not. It's absolutely invisible. And so no one knows, especially if you're prideful, that you have not a clue what's going on. And then there are others that are similar. Like, I don't know what's going on. We just kind of act like we know what we're doing, because I went to a large university. No one's acting like they don't belong here. Everyone is acting like they have some kind of money. I mean, this shirt is one of 5 that I probably could have ever owned in college, and I was fine with that. But being aware of that, other people came from different backgrounds, and then I'm someone's first. I've never seen, on my university, it's a popular trend. There's not a lot of African Americans, especially males, that are successful in college, let alone going to university, that only graduate, I think, 2% when I graduated out of multiple thousands of people that in that student body. So being competitive and competing against like family members that doubt me, then competing against myself to be a role model for my little sister, my cousins, and then for the people that have a ill-conceived notion of me as an African American, but not knowing it, like I'm struggling because I just don't know what college is. And that's like me being new to college, but not wanting to partner with me. That was just something I had to kind of go through during the career. So I learned that very quickly. I mean, in life, but in college, I realized it was just another replication of what I kind of experienced in life. And just knowing that if I just pull a few good top grades to start, people will talk to me and they realize, oh, you're qualified to be here. Well, I have this question and I realized we're not that far apart.
Yeah, thank you. Others?
I'll add to that. I think just to go off of what Troylin said about like not asking questions and whatnot, I think that first gens, and I'm making a blanket statement here, try to be as self-sufficient as possible. And it might be a poverty thing. I don't really know what the source of that is, but I think there's something there to be said about just wanting to try to do it on your own, or being conditioned to think that you can do it on your own, and not seeking the help that you might need. And I think that was probably the biggest struggle I had going through college and whatnot, is not reaching out, but then not knowing what kind of questions to ask too. Right? So I tell this to students all the time, like you don't know what you don't know. So how do you ask a question about what you don't know, right? And so I feel as if that already disadvantages first gens, because if they don't even know what to ask, how do they even get that information? So I don't know. I think that's a conundrum I'm still like working through. I'm still trying to help students work through too. It takes time just to sit down and try to articulate and make meaning of something that might not be there, but that and stuff, that struggle to like get to meaning and get to the questions that you need to ask, I think that's valuable. Like, and there's negatives and positives to that, right? Being that like, if you don't know what you don't know, then that's a disadvantage. But then getting to the answers, that journey to get to the answers, I think makes first gens stronger in some ways.
That a couple of things you said there really resonate with me, and because and not knowing what you don't know, I think is a big part of that too, and also and this could just be me. This could be a little picture into John Foran's psychology. I don't know, but I remember as a first year student in college, and I was swimming lost at sea basically in a lot of ways, but also I was very resistant to reaching out for help, because, and part of that I think was, and not just sort of, well, I can rely on myself, but I also, it's like, I don't want to label myself as needing specific help. Like, no, I don't want people to look at me and go like, oh, he's the kid from Farmtown, Ohio, who, you know, and that was a mistake. And it took me a while to figure that out. Like, no, that was in my own head, basically. The sort of, I don't want to ask for help because I will sort of, I don't know, reveal that I need help or something. Yeah. And that's something, yeah, I would advise people, you know, sort of new to the college environment, like, you know, get over that, because yeah, like everybody needs help, and there's so much support and so much, and just answering questions and sort of helping you figure out what you don't know. Because things like very nuts and bolts kinds of things, registration, like what, you know, I'm stunned that any Miami student can figure out what the Miami plan is supposed to be as related to major requirements. I mean,
I'm an associate dean and I can't figure it out.
Yeah, we're kind of winging it as we go, right? Yeah, like, and so like often it's, you know, if you don't understand it, it's because it's incredibly complex and like, yeah, nobody really understands this stuff. Let's figure it out together, right? But that hesitancy to ask for help, that my wife tells me even now, like I'm very hesitant to ask for help. And so that could just be a little personality quirk on my part, but it's important in that context.
I can relate. I was the first gen who was too proud to even ask a question in class. I would always think, I'll take the book home and figure it out on my own. Always, that was my approach. And it took a long time to get past that.
Yeah.
John, because we're talking about what we don't know and asking for help, I don't want to take us off track, but it segues from that. I don't know. I know it's casual. I do my research in the area of student health and well-being, and oftentimes the issue that comes up is they don't ask for help, right? And that makes things so much harder than they have to be. And so when I have conversations with students about why, they say they ask someone for help and they don't get the help they need. And I think, to speak to what Lynn just was saying, is maybe they're not asking for, like, they don't know what they're asking for, so the person can't help them. But here's what I want to emphasize to anybody that is having trouble asking for help, and then when they finally get the courage up and put their ego or their pride aside and ask for help, they don't get the help they need. Don't let that deter you. Ask another person and another person, right? Just keep asking people. And even if you don't know, you could just say, I don't know, but I know I need help. I just don't know where, and I'm lost. Just to be able to say that is really important. You don't get what you don't ask for.
And just to piggyback off of that, all you newfangled whippersnappers got this cool thing called YouTube and on the interwebs. You can just Google and YouTube what's it like being a first-gen student, and you will find plenty of other people telling you the lowdown. I would have loved to have that. I didn't know the term first generation back then. It's been over a decade since people started calling it a term. But yeah, that's to everyone's kind of alluding. It's a lot it's connected to pride, but I think it's also a little bit of a fear of imposter syndrome, being outed as, oh, you don't know what you're doing. And asking for help is hard for a lot of people. It's just they don't want to be perceived as someone in need, like they're at a deficit.
Oh, let me circle back to a different but related topic that a couple of people have touched on, which is the sort of the relationship to family and sort of the decision to go to college. And I mean, where in a lot of, I'll put it in terms of my own family. So my children have grown up in an environment where there's an expectation, like this is what you will do, right? So we've never had a conversation of like, gee, Dad, I think I want to go to college. What does that look like? Right? Because it just, it doesn't come up, where like a lot of first generation college students, myself included, like that, it wasn't an expectation. Now, I was fortunate that my family was supportive, but my father didn't graduate from high school, and so was very supportive of like, I want you to do that, but was limited in what he could do in terms of advice, that kind of thing. But I don't know if might be interesting to hear if anyone has any thoughts on sort of what brought you to the place, if you can recall this, where you decided like, hey, I'm going to go pursue this. Do you know what I mean? And how your family reacted, or was family a part of that, or teachers, high school teachers or coaches, or I'm just curious, like how did you come to the decision to take that path?
I think in my case, John, I was lucky that I had a family more like yours than like Dee's, in that my family was very supportive. I liked school from the start. I was academically oriented from the start. And I think my folks saw it as a way for me to advance past where they had been able to advance. I'm sure there were jobs that either of them could have done that somebody with a degree got in front of them just because of that piece of paper, when they weren't necessarily harder workers or better fits for the job or what have you. So as far back as I can remember, kind of like Troylin said, his folks saying college. That was how it was in my family. So they were very supportive. I'll tell you something that I think would only happen in a first-gen family. Spring semester of my sophomore year, about 3 or 4 weeks left in the semester, my father passed away, and I was living 3.5 or 4 hours away from home. That's how far it was from New Orleans to where I grew up. And my mother told me later she almost considered not telling me until after the semester ended, so that it wouldn't screw me up on final exams. And I mean, that shows you kind of the desperation level that you can have if you're first gen. And I don't think any non-first gen would have that experience. So that was eye-opening to me as far as how much it meant to my mother and father that she would even think that for a split second. I don't even know what the original question was because now I'm upset. But anyway, so I'll stop.
Yeah, like our goal is not to upset people, but okay. Yeah, others have thoughts or?
I'll provide a different perspective. I think that support can be a double-edged sword. I'll say that because my family was very supportive of me going to college, to the point where it wasn't even a question, right? So I think that growing up in the family I did, I think there's some racial, ethnic components to that was just expected of me to go to college and be successful. Yeah. So I think there was very little room to have decisions or have a choice in that. And I think there's a particular kind of pressure that comes with like what that meant. But then there was, so that in that way they were supportive, right? But then there wasn't the, well, I can show you how to do things kind of support. So I think we're talking about different kinds of support here. And I think that's important to consider as well. Because I don't think my family knew how to support me, even though they wanted me to succeed, and they were like supportive in that way.
100%. I don't have anything more to add other than that is exactly my definition of what family support looked like. Again, it's probably a bit of cultural differences. It's very weird when I think we need to hear, I guess I'll speak to myself personally, but there are others that are similar to me, needing to hear that expectation to attain a college degree, even though no one else around has done it, because the difference between that and not having it from my perspective is that I didn't have to make a decision. That question mark of what I was going to do after high school was gone. I at least had something. And while I know college is not the answer for everybody, and not everyone's ready to go right after high school, but everything that my father died when I was 12, but everything that my parents did up to at least 18 and beyond prepared me for making sure that decision was solid. And so I didn't doubt that I was going to go. I didn't alternatively, and I think maybe Lynn was alluding to this, I couldn't see anything past college. I wasn't equipped for, all right, I'm here. Something's supposed to happen. Right. And so that's where, and so support really didn't kind of matriculate to maybe an energy beyond being in college, which doesn't help me maximize my use of college and answering questions. So it is kind of a double-edged sword. It's necessary for me to get to that point, but beyond that, that question mark was right in front of my face.
In terms of, yeah, sort of piggybacking on the idea, it's a double-edged sword. I very much remember. So I had very supportive parents, but they would have been okay with me if I had gone to college and then dropped out after a semester. That would have been okay too. You know, it was and at any point. So when it was deciding whether to go to graduate school, it's like, well, yeah, if you want to, yeah, that's great, or you don't have to do that. It was very much sort of we'll support whatever you want to be kind of thing. But I do remember in college feeling intense pressure too. And maybe this is socioeconomics more than just first generation college student. But I was very aware that my parents were sacrificing a huge amount that they didn't have necessarily. So I could go to a school that was expensive, and yeah, so I felt a lot of pressure, and I not in an unjustified way, a lot of pressure to do well, to like succeed, because it's like you're kind of, yeah, rightly or wrongly, felt like I'm the college kid in this family, and they're putting a lot into this, and I need to make this work. Yeah, and probably undue pressure in some sense, but.
Well, I think to add to that, John, it's the sense that you're being tasked to uplift everybody else, right? Like they've put so much into you, right? So like you become a representation of like what they could be too. And so, yeah, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, especially in my family where they're just like, you have to succeed. Like that's not a question. And so I think I took failure really hard. And I failed a lot, by the way, and that's something else that maybe we can talk about. But I didn't know how to deal with failure initially. It was a really hard thing to learn, to not be like, so in high school, I felt like things came very easily to me. In college, it did not. And so like, what did it mean to like sit in a room of like really smart students who had tutors, who had, you know, all of this access to resources that I never had. And like, how do I catch up to something like that, right? And having to do so because your family's counting on you to make it. Because then again, that reflects on them, so.
One more thing, and Lynn brought this up, and this relates to not knowing how to ask the question. I liken it to not knowing the language of college. Navigating college is a language, is a skill, just like writing. And it's not natural. So how do you be an effective tutor? How do you be an effective note taker? Everything in high school seemed to come natural to me. My parents pushed me extremely. I knew algebra at first grade. Like they were pushing me so hard to be, I think what Lynn was saying, like you are an embodiment of their success. As I imagine, this is like generational. Like they're building. You're the promised child. We've invested in you. You grow, but you're going to progress further than where we were. So you get to this point where you're this gifted person. I've never needed tutoring. Studying, what is that? Notes, what are those? Right? I knew how to navigate not having money, but I get to college and the only really useful thing I had was knowing how to navigate while not having any money. I'm like, notes, Spark Notes, office hours, and tutor, man. Brand new language that you have to learn if you want to be a successful college student.
And that goes beyond the classroom too. That goes to sort of office hours. What would that be about? And I remember interviewing for a work study job on campus and not having any idea what that would look like because I just never done anything like that before. And it was a miserable experience in a lot of ways. And sort of on the other side of that too, I remember you go through graduate school, you get a PhD, and I remember the sort of, okay, are you going to go to graduation? You're going to go to the graduation ceremony, and most of my friends at Hopkins were like, nah, and I'm like, no, for my family, no, this was like a foreign family reunion. Like you've got cousins, you've got, like, because it's like, my God, somebody, and that was a very cool thing too, in the sense of like, because it was very supportive, but it traces back to this idea of like, you are kind of representing the family in some sort of, not in any way that's articulated, but yeah, there's some sense of like, this is about all of us or something. Yeah, I don't know. Did that make any sense? I don't even know, but yeah, I'm curious. It's a good.
I just want to jump in with what you're talking about, the language. I didn't have the same pressure that, as you know, from my family. It was my own pressure to do well because I saw it as a way out of the poverty and the dysfunction of my family. And to me, it was a life preserver. It was like, if I failed, then I'm going to be miserable the rest of my life in that chaos. But to speak to what you all were talking about, like, I remember I did well in high school. And I remember the first time, one of my hardest college classes in my freshman year, we had a stack of 3 or 4 books. And the teacher was like, he's like, read it. If you have a question about one of these books, let me know. Otherwise, you're on your own. Like, I was like, what? You're not going to go over this in class? Like, it was just a different environment. And so that made it a little bit more challenging. But I stepped up because that resilience that everyone here is talking about, this certain resilience that you develop from being a first gen, I think, from being a first gen college student, you build this resilience up. And so if I were kind of like up against a challenge, I didn't think I could do it. Or if my family would once again say, you're never going to do it, I'd be like, okay, sit down and watch. It just made me more determined. It just made me more determined all the way through my doctorate. And even now, I'll be like, oh yeah, tell me I can't. And I absolutely will. And you just kind of develop that. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Dee, I don't think that you can develop a vaccine for COVID. That ought to knock that problem out.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, for most things, okay, maybe I shouldn't generalize, but I wish I could. I really do. But I'll support someone that does.
Well, let me ask how, and I have a specific answer to this question for myself, but I'll wait and see what other people say. Like, how does the experience then of being a first generation college student sort of shape or inform how you work on a college campus, in a higher ed environment, how you interact with students, that kind of thing?
Empathy, like, because I've been there, I know what it's like, I understand it. And in fact, it actually just made me like apply to regional campus. I've been teaching at the regional campuses since 2006. So I started at UC's regional campus, and then I decided to come to the better school to Miami. And I literally made the conscious decision to be at the regional campus, to work with regional campus students. And I just use my experience. So a little bit more flexible, not flexible as in they do whatever they want, but a little bit more compassionate and resourceful, and being a resource for them and letting them know I'm here for them as a resource. So yeah, that's how it's affected me.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of us we use the knowledge that we have to help others that are following that same path. My first job after college, I worked for a small 2-year institution where primarily first gen, those that some weren't even citizens, a lot of students that I knew were destined for great stuff, but the traditional college route wasn't working for them, even community college. So what I've just done is whatever I can I talk to students. I assume that everyone is in need and it's okay. Let's have a conversation. And my job as someone who's, I think, successfully navigated higher education is to make it easier for everybody else. That is my job. So regardless of what I'm doing, it's a conversation, and sometimes not even the person who's actively going to any college, but just talking to them about what resources they can get access to, free resources in terms of transportation, scholarships, money, educational funds, knowing what questions to ask for colleges, taking the number of free resources for figuring out what they want to do with life. Because sometimes the conversation stops at college, not for me, when their entrance point is, I don't know what I want to do and I'm scared to talk about it.
And Lynn?
Oh, so this is a plug for a presentation I'm having next week. LLW is going to have like their presentation week on Thursday, and I actually am working with a graduate student who started out as a student in one of my lower level courses, and we're going to talk about her journey to becoming a PhD student at Oxford, and what that meant to like prepare her application, prepare her materials to be competitive, to be accepted into a pretty rigorous program. So I think in many ways we've been talking about this, but I'll come across students where I know they have the potential to make it, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be graduate school, right? And I feel like I see myself in them, and I feel like, yes, I have to reach out in some sort of way to be like, this is how you navigate the unknown, right? And so I told her she was going to go into industry. I think she started working for a children's hospital. And when she graduated, I said, when you get bored with this job and you want to come back and start reading books again, come talk to me, because we're going to put you into a graduate program. And she took me up on it. So we're working together. We're going to work on an article that we're trying to publish. So yeah, come see her. She's brilliant. And I feel like, you know, those are the moments that really make this job worth it, right? Like you see these students who are just like, oh, you know, like it's, you're gonna make it. And you just need to know what questions to ask, and you just need to have that pathway for you. And I think all of us are trying to do that for our students.
Yeah, and I would just wholeheartedly second that too. Like I find myself saying to like new faculty when these things come up, like, and it's not just sort of mentoring students and sort of framing things sometimes. And I think this is especially true with first generation. Like, may not be able to imagine how you get from point A to point B, but it's like, hey, you're really good at this. And, you know, you ought to think about graduate school. You ought to think of it, because that was super important for me, actually. A faculty mentor who said, like, you know, well, when I was an undergrad, it was a combination of, you know, you need to get out of bed a little more consistently for your 8 o'clock class. I've noticed you're not there, right? And which was huge for me, that it's like, oh yeah, like wake up call, right? And, but also saying like, you know, you could think about this next step. This is doable, right? But especially with not just students who may be headed to graduate school or professional school, but also just like every other student, advising is so hugely important. And I find myself saying sort of repeatedly like that, you know, hopefully you never become too busy that you don't take 5 minutes and talk to somebody if they have a question or something, because if you do, you shouldn't be doing this anymore, because that 5-minute conversation for me, I mean, I have a specific anecdote of like why I went into constitutional law as an undergrad and then ended up, you know, like, I think I'll do that for a PhD. And it's like, so I'm a law person. Why is that? Well, it is in large part because when I was a junior in college, and I was thinking like, I might be interested in Russian politics, something like that. I went to talk to the Russian politics specialist at U of C where I was at. And she told me, she's like, I don't have time for undergrads. I just like, you know, and so I'm like, oh, and it was kind of like, now what do I do? Because everybody had to do a junior qualifying paper and then a senior thesis. I'm like, well, great. I can't do a paper in what I want to do. So I'm taking this con law class. I'll go talk to that guy and see what he says, and then kind of liked that, and then did the senior thesis, and then graduate. You know, it's like, so that 5-minute. Okay, this story's too long, but that little 5-minute sort of blowing off of the undergrad who needed help was a big thing for me. Turned out fine. Yeah, I was going to study the Soviet Union. That didn't work out well anyway. So, but you know, but. Yeah, so these little 5-minute conversations, and I do think it's the background of sort of not having that base of knowledge, and like, I need help from this person, and it's essential to our role as faculty and staff to be that support person. That's why I'm, you know, I am very passionate about the role of the regionals in sort of providing access to education. But that, it's not enough to have access. You have to have that support structure too. So I'll stop talking, but yeah, but what you said kind of resonated there. So we're almost out of time, actually. But can I just ask, what is, if you had one piece of advice to give to first generation students, what would it be? And could we just kind of go around and.
So I think it's important to get socially integrated, because A, you won't be lonely, but you know, you never know what help or what, you never know how that might help you. And I also think if it makes you view your college experience more positively, then you are also sort of more determined to do what you have to do to stay. So I highly recommend getting socially integrated. In my case, I lived in a dormitory. If you're on the regionals, you don't have that built-in way of making friends and getting socially integrated. But I would say join a student org, create study groups in your classes. Especially if you're first gen, it helps if you have that kind of support available to you. So make some friends, talk to some people, get socially integrated. And I think that makes a huge difference, if nothing else, in just the overall enjoyability of the experience.
Great, thing.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that to get engaged, and I worked full time. I worked almost full 3/4 time, and I went to school full time. So I didn't have a lot of time, but I did get engaged in 2 organizations, student orgs that were related to my major. And that gave me a support network. And I'm still friends many years later with those same friends. They're in different states, but thank goodness for Facebook and Zoom and all that. But definitely that helped me, study. It helped me, picked me up when I needed picking up. And it just, as Bob said, I wasn't lonely anymore. That's for sure. So definitely get engaged.
If I can just link with the question that I think Emily Hughes asked, with what people are saying, if you're connected with a lot of people, you will just have conversations. And my advice is prioritize you. Learn what you're actually struggling with. If you prioritize your own success instead of the pride of not asking questions, you're going to have direct conversations towards things that you need. And if it's not going to be faculty staff, it'll be somebody else who's either figuring out what you're doing or has done it or equally doesn't know. Direct these types of conversations to faculty, staff, alumni, neighbors, someone else that can positively direct you, because ultimately, if you're prioritizing you and your success, you should be seeking these answers, because we as faculty, no one else can make you get the help you need. No one else can tell you to apply the things that you need. And you can't define the unknown if you first identify that you have a problem. It's not a 12-step program you need to enroll in. I think it's 1 step. If you're prioritizing you will be talking to people and developing the language that you can use to navigate college.
So I think many people said what I was going to say about networking. It is so important to get support from your own colleagues, right? Because you pull your information, you share what classes work for you, what the resources are for this or that. But I'll add to this and say, be okay with failure. Figure out what that means for you. It hurts, work through it and learn from it. Those are probably the best lessons you're going to have, but also know you're going to survive that too. Yeah, you might get a D or F in a class. Okay, do it again. Just make sure that you don't take those failures as an indication that you can't make it.
And when she meant by do it again, she meant take the class over and do successful, not get the F again.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Don't get the F again. But if you do know, maybe that major isn't for you, and that's okay too. I think a lot of what college should be is that it's a moment of exploration for what you want to do in your life, but also who you are. And so maybe what you thought you were isn't applicable, and that's okay to change. It's okay. It's really okay to change. I was pre-med up until junior year. Middle of junior year, and I decided I wanted to switch majors, and I started double majoring in biology and English, and I had to haul butt to get done in time, right? But that was the best decision, one of the best decisions I made, because here I am.
And I would totally agree with that too. I was sort of poli-sci or music. I was thinking I wanted to be a high school band director for a long time, and would have been happy doing that actually. And it is, and you see this a lot with students, not just first generation students, but students generally sort of approaching college as I have this checklist of things I need to get done. And once I get done with that, I can do this job that I've already figured out what I want to do. And so I guess I would sort of underline the idea, it is okay. It's not only okay, it's expected to sort of, your attitudes are going to change. Your interests are going to change. Take some classes that have nothing whatsoever to do with your major. The best class I took as an undergrad was an anthropology course, paleontology course that had zero. It's just really cool. And it's also the only class I ever took where the guy teaching it literally canceled the final midway through it because he was so excited. He came into class and he's like, there was this new thing published and he wanted to share it with us. And so he starts showing slides and we're like, you know, he's like, oh, forget about the final, you know, which we don't do, but he did, right? And but like that, such an exciting sort of learning experience, and your attitudes change, and you know, you'll figure it out. Yeah, like everybody sort of figures out what their path is. And yeah.
To segue off, John, because everyone's saying the same thing, but when the first degree I finished, which was my Associates of Applied Science in Medical Assisting, we had to wrap that up with an internship. And I aced all those classes. I'm like, this is it. This is great. I get to the internship and very quickly realize I don't like working with sick people. It's depressing. So it's like I just did a 2-year degree. And so I was, but you know what? To this day, I use that medical assisting. So even if you have to change course, that's not wasted. I learned a very important thing about myself. I don't like working with sick people. I'm too emotional for that. And that stuff kind of fed into, I actually, as a medical assistant doing my internship, because I finished it, I earned my degree, I became a certified medical assistant. I wasn't going to not finish because I had to, but I did that. And then I realized that working with those sick people, I realized if they just ate right, and if they just took care of themselves, so I became a registered dietitian. From that lesson, I was like, I'm going to help them prevent diabetes if I can, you know, and then I went on and you know, but it's all going somewhere.
Great lesson. Like I mean, I was pre-law until the end of my junior year. And then I did it, you know, it's like, I'm going to go to law school because what else do you do as a political science major? Like, again, had no real sense. Right. And I liked law stuff. And then I worked at a law firm. I was in an internship, took a quarter off because I was a little ahead of where I needed to be to graduate. So I'm like, I'll take the fall quarter off my senior year, intern at a law firm, make a little bit of money, and then graduate with my class in June. And like, so from June to December, I was working at a law firm. In June, I was taking the LSAT to get ready to apply to law school. By October, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not doing this because, I mean, I just hated it, actually. But, you know, and then I thought, well, I like law. Maybe I could teach law stuff, which is what I ended up doing, you know, ultimately. Like, but that, yeah, I mean, what seemed at the time like this sort of existential crisis or something was actually, no, it's a great learning experience. I learned I don't want to do that. And that's okay. Yeah. Now, would my income have been a lot better having done that? Probably. But, you know, but yeah. So
I have a quick story.
Sure.
Okay. So I ended up minoring in biology, and which seemed for a moment there like a complete waste of time. Like, you know, most of my, you know, undergrad education was taking science courses. OChem was not my friend, by the way. But some of you might know this. I have a farm out in Indiana. I do my own fecal samples from my goats, and I give them shots too. So it came in handy for, you know, livestock, and saves me money too, because those fecal samples are not cheap at the vet.
Well, that seems like a perfect way to end a conversation right there. So yeah. So yeah, we're out of time. Jamie, would you like to say anything before we stop? Or
absolutely. This was just fantastic. We received, I received several comments from people that this was an amazing forum. We are just so grateful for you sharing your stories and reminding students that you're not alone. There are a lot of people here that want to help you succeed. And I know it's really scary to ask questions, but if you put yourself out there, you can get connected to lots of resources. And please do check us out in TRIO, where we help students with things like graduate school and the career preparation and exploration. And know that you matter and you belong here. Yeah, thank you all so much. We're at time.
Well said, Jamie, and thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for your help. Thank you to our committee. We had a great group of folks. We're excited to see what next year might bring. We might be back in person by then, so we'll be hopeful. But
let's hope. Well, D's working on a vaccine, I heard, so it's fine. Yeah.
Oh, thank you all, and thank you to our audience. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Safe, be well, and check out the other first gen events that are happening. There's a panel this afternoon at Oxford and then one on Monday. If you just type in first generation on the Miami website, that should come up for you.
Great.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks, you too.
weekend.
Thanks.